Hi, everyone. So nice to meet you. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to chat with you today. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about how we crushed prospecting at Snowflake using AI. We all know the SDR role is really time consuming. So today, we're going to be breaking down how the SDRs work and how we've used AI to optimize their workflows. And so I have a really awesome role at Snowflake, and that is to make sure that these 300 SDRs are all working as effectively and efficiently as possible and continuing to grow and do their business without getting burnt out. So a really quick question that I'm curious if someone can answer, like what's the most time consuming part of an SDR role? It's not a trick question. It's prospecting. So name of the title, like SDRs spend so much time doing this role of prospecting, which yes, totally does include search and research. So if we look at the SDR team, we're going to call these two SDRs Bob and Sally. Bob and Sally are our SDR team, and their primary jobs are to do research. So they spend a ton of time looking at internal tools, looking at third-party tools, figuring out like what's going on within their prospects that they can use to drive calls and also send emails. So when we look at this, we're like, wow, that's a lot of work. How do we fix this for our team? So I want to take you back. So 2 years ago, I want to share with you like where we were at, and then I'll give a little bit of a show of where we're at today. But I think it's important to understand how an SDR works day to day and where we're at in 2023. So again, taking this back, our SDR team uses outreach. This is where they sit in. This is where they have a list of contacts. This is where they make calls. This is where they draft their emails. This is where we want them to live. However, unfortunately, outreach doesn't have a ton of data. Like it does have some imports from Salesforce, but teams still need to use our like first party tools. So they're still going to Salesforce. They're opening up Tableau dashboards. They've got SQL queries. They're running in Snowflake. So those are 3 tabs that they have open. Then they need to use third party tools. They've got their enrichment providers like ZoomInfo. They're performing Google searches. They're on LinkedIn. So already these teams have 6 tabs open for their given prospect. And then the cherry on top is we have a content committee, bless their hearts, their goal was to create sequences and outreach for these SDRs to choose from. So these sequences essentially were like, you figure out who this person is, what feature is going to relate to them, and you choose that sequence. As you can imagine, there are hundreds of possibilities of what those sequences were. When I started, we had over 30,000 sequences in outreach for our SDR teams to look at. So if we actually look at what this looks like for an SDR, the SDR goes to outreach, they figure out their prospect list, then they walk over, they open up their first party tools, then they go to the third party tools, and then they go and figure out which sequence to put that in. And they're doing this over and over again. And all of a sudden, your SDR team that was glowing, that was bright, that was so excited to be there, that loves the job, all of a sudden they start to look like this. They're really tired. They've been doing this over and over again. So they're coming in and their new day looks like this. Okay, I'm in outreach, but I don't want to do the first party research today. I don't really feel like going and doing any of the deep research on third party research. And I'm not going to look for a sequence. I know what all of them are. I'm just going to load them into the sequences that I'm familiar with and just pray and hope that one of these works. The outcome of this is an email that looks something like this. And don't worry, you don't need to read everything on here. But what is important in this is that these sequences when reps don't spend the time doing research is that it's super broad. We use these very broad statements like, I believe this is going to be the right thing for your company. The reason why this is right for some very broad thing, yada, yada, yada. And then best of all is we usually have this big wall of just Snowflake features. Let's just throw them all out and hope that one of them fits. And the problem with this, and when we looked at the data of these sequences, we were getting 0.5% of replies. So this is almost 20,000 people that our SDR team sequenced and got 0.5% of a reply. What a waste of time. So I want to start to talk a little bit about where we're at today and how we got there. I want to toss some numbers up and just curious if anyone can take a guess at what these numbers mean or might be. Yes, we do. Thank you. So the top number is 55,000 prospects that we've pushed through our automated systems. 7.6%, yes, is the email reply rate that we've maintained for those 55,000 prospects that we pushed through. And 2,000 is the number of meetings that we booked on behalf of our SDR team with this automated messaging. And so the question is, how do we do this? And yes, we are at this AI Summit. So part of this is related to AI, but I think it's really important that we break down how exactly it is that we've used AI, because it's not as simple as just saying, oh, we taught our team to use ChatGPT or taught our team to use Claude. Because yes, we have SDRs that were really good at doing this process. They would copy the data from the first party tools, copy the data maybe from the third party tools, maybe not even. Like, these models are getting better where you can just say, hey, write me a sales email, do deep research. But I think the thing to keep in mind is, yes, that works for a single prospect, but our SDRs have hundreds of accounts with dozens of contacts within each of those accounts. So the expectation that they're going to do this for each of these prospects, it's just not realistic. So we needed to figure out, how do we build a repetitive process that doesn't only support this for a single prospect, but also helps us generate this for the thousands of prospects that our reps are going after in a given day or week. We needed to figure out what was missing. We knew that AI could be incredibly powerful for our teams, but how do we make it scale without SDRs actually having to put prompts into a large language model and get these emails out? And the answer for us was using orchestration, and specifically a tool called Workato. If you're not familiar with Workato, maybe you're familiar with Zapier. Essentially what Workato is, it's a layer that sits over your existing tech stack, and it provides a low code, no code way to pull together tools that don't natively talk to each other. So the best way to think about this as well is, so what we want to do here is, when something happens, we want the system to do this task. Then we want it to do the next task. And then we want it to do another task. And we want all of this to happen without the SDR having to do anything but do one action. So essentially, this creates your AI on autopilot. So your team is not having to do anything but one thing to get this AI process started. So if we take a look back at the tech stack that we saw before, we've removed out the sequences at the end, because all of a sudden, we don't need a content committee creating thousands of sequences anymore, because AI can determine, hey, this is the best feature that we want to talk about. This is the right persona that we're writing the message to. But the biggest change here is that we have Workato sitting over or under everything, connecting it all together. And so what we wanted to break down simply, and I'm going to talk through this in simple phase, and it'll get more complex with time. We knew that SDRs spend time in outreach. So that's where we wanted to start. We wanted to create something that was incredibly simple. We didn't want to create another system or another tool or just some other location for reps to go to. So we wanted to first make it so when an SDR adds a prospect to outreach, that then triggers all the things that we want to do. So SDR adds prospect to a sequence. Then Workato is great. I'm going to go do all of that first party research for you. I'm going to pull all of that data from the account. Then I'm going to go to all those third-party tools and find out what information we need to know externally. And lastly, it's then going to write that email on behalf of the SDR. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about this workflow and in a little bit more detail, because there's a little more nuance to that I think's made us successful. So again, as we mentioned, first step here, and I have Bob and Sally here because they're going to exist just in this SDR rep adds prospect. They're not going to have to do anything else. Starts out, rep adds to prospect to outreach. Workato then picks it up. Workato then uses the information from outreach. Usually it's an email to go search Zoom info, pull back what the company is, what the company news is, and what the person's information is. It's also going to go look at our internal tools like Salesforce and Snowflake and pull all the information. And it pulls it together in pretty ugly type of way, but that's okay because we have a large language model to parse through all that data and find the stuff that's important. So once that's done, we're going to use Claude with all that information. So we concatenate all that together along with a prompt. And we say, hey, go ahead and draft the first email on behalf of the SDR. And I think oftentimes a lot of people stop here and they say, great, like we've got that first email, we're going to give it to the sales team. And one of the biggest learnings we found is that this worked 8, 9 times out of 10. But again, as you're thinking about scale, if you're only doing 10, sure, one's wrong, but we're talking about thousands of emails, which then turns into like hundreds of emails that are either missing information or aren't covering the things that we want to. So what differentiates us and what's worked well is we've introduced this additional layer, which actually scores and validates that first email. So it acts as that first layer to verify, is what we're talking about actually relevant? Are we talking about the right news event? Is this structured right? Even down to some of the simple things like, hey, did you remember to take out the M dashes because our SDR team hated when those were in? I get it. Like I see the emails and I'm like, yep, AI wrote that. And even if you instruct it with that first prompt, no matter how good you are at writing prompts, it's still at scale, will not follow 10 out of 10 times. However, when you introduce scoring, you can help make sure those things don't happen. And I want to shock through a couple examples of what we saw with emails before we introduced this scoring layer. As one of the biggest benefits of using AI and enrichment for drafting emails for sales is being able to find news that's relevant for prospects. The unfortunate part is, again, if you're not using scoring, AI finds news and will talk about all sorts of different things. So some of the real life examples that we saw, one of my favorites is, hey, we saw your latest SEC investigation. Not great. Don't love that. Another one we saw was, congrats on the CEO transition, who was just fired. And we also saw, hope layoffs are going smoothly. So yes, the large language model did call out news that was important, but it was not relevant for what we wanted to be talking about with that given prospect. So by introducing this additional layer just to validate, hey, is this news? Here's the information about the person. Here's what this email was, and here's all the news. Is that actually appropriate to call out? We can ensure that we're actually writing the right emails. And so what happens here is it scores this email to verify that it's actually accurate. It verifies the sentiment to make sure it's right for the person that we're sending it to. And then it provides an output of scores for areas where it needs to be improved. And the outcome of this is that we then send this to a final email draft. So what we're seeing here is we're not just using a single prompt to do everything for our team. We're starting to build specialized prompts that do one action really well, and then building validation to ensure that it's still doing it to the best of its ability. And then we're getting that final output and sending it to the sales team. When that final email is drafted, the last step is obviously we got to get that back into outreach. So we use Workato to parse the output of this, and we use XML to do it, which I'm going to get to in a second because some of you might know what XML is. Some of you guys are like, I have no idea what it is. But the goal here that we're talking about is like the SDR team never has to leave outreach for any of this. If they have 20 prospects they're going after, they don't have to go through that process over and over again of trying to figure out all these different things to research. They just add all 20 prospects to this single outreach sequence, and all this stuff happens without them having to do anything else, and it gets back in. So I want to double click into this XML output because it has been a really helpful driver for us, not only in messaging, but in several other use cases that we're building with AI. And the reason why this is important, and really quick show of hands, for folks that have used ChatGPT, Claude, like how many of you get exactly what you need out of that output? Like you're not copy and paste. You can copy and paste the whole thing. Most of the time you're having to select out just a small snippet. And so again, even if your prompts are really good and you say, hey, only output the sales email, again, you might do that 8 times out of 10, but there's gonna be other instances where it says, oh, sure thing, like just random nuances before. Now, when you introduce XML, it essentially adds tags. And the way you can think of this is it's a filing system, like an ELI5, explain like I'm 5. It's a filing system for how you tag content. So what this enables you to do is to add tags around the important things of the email. So this can be the subject line, this can be the email body, and this then allows you to parse out those specific things. So when you're loading this back into Outreach, you're only loading in that every single time. You're not worrying about pulling in things that say, hey, here's your email, yada, yada, yada. And that way you get consistent outputs every time, ensuring that you're not going to have any of this garbage going out to your sales team or your sales team saying things aren't broken. So now that we've talked through all of that, I want to show what an AI written email looks like now. So right away, we can see that it's a lot shorter, but it's also a lot more relevant. So I have Craig in here. So we know Craig might be prepping for LP meetings. So again, more relevant for what Craig actually cares about. We also talk a little bit about, hey, we know you're a fund manager and these are instances of other companies that we've talked to and the types of conversations that we've had with them. And lastly, the information is just more buttoned up and more concise. Craig would be a busy guy. I wouldn't expect him to read that previous email that we sent. So it's a lot more buttoned up. And so from here, we're always, as operators, wondering like, can we do better? How do we make this even more relevant? So I do want to give a high-level overview of the current workflow that's a little bit more advanced, but I've broken it out into sections so that you can walk through. And I think before I turn to the next slide, the takeaway of this workflow that I'm about to show you isn't like to copy and paste and do everything the exact same way that we did, but I think it's to show you the power of what orchestration can enable you to do within your business, as it's incredibly modular and it's so quick to make changes, add additional points in to drive change for your team. So this is our advanced workflow. And I think the next one, actually, we have this slide in there, it covers more details, but we're going to blow it up just a little bit so you can actually read it on these screens. Perfect. I see phones out. Love photos. What we're going to talk through first is step 1. We've already been here. SDR team adds to Outreach. I've said that like 10 times now. So we're going to move on. Workato does a third-party research, does the first-party research. Now, we wanted to introduce something a little bit more advanced here. Love ZoomInfo. It's been a great tool, but it's not always the best at giving us relevant news. If we needed news from 6 months ago, it would be fantastic. But like today, our SDR team needs news from today. So there's 2 things that we're going to be covering in this next section. One is that we use Claude to help us generate a concise summary of who the company is. So it takes the first-party, third-party research, creates a concise, like 1-paragraph explanation of who the company is, right? And we're going to get to why that's important in a second. Additionally, it takes that company summary and also determines, hey, what searches on the web would be most relevant to extract information? Because one of the downsides of using large language models via API, and maybe this is close to being solved for, is like if you use Claude through the web, it can go do web research for you. But when you're calling it through API, you're just using the model and it's not out looking for websites. So we need to solve for that so we can actually pull relevant information, because these models are still trained on data from really behind. So we generate 20 to 25 search terms, which are then used through web search. So we've seen these to Bing because we use Azure. It could be Google, whatever you have. We do this through Workato. That extracts information. And then again, what's important here is we actually validate that information, because as you could assume, we're sending 20 search terms into Google, pulling those all back. There's all sorts of nonsense that we're going to pull back. So we want to make sure that we're not talking about SEC investigations, layoffs, or anything like that. And then the bottom part here, we want to also be able to pull in relevant customers that we work with. At Snowflake, we have over 1,000 customers that are referenceable. Before, SDRs would have to go to a Tableau dashboard, filter by the industry, and look for which company is actually the right one that they want to use. Sometimes they just have snippets. Like, we want our SDR teams to be more dynamic with the customers, be able to talk about ones that are new and aren't just stagnant ones that they've kept as a repository in a notepad for the past year. So we actually use Snowflake and we use a RAG model to actually identify, okay, here's who the customer is, find customers that we work for, pull 10 of those, and then we use Claude to say, okay, of these 10, which 1 or 2 is the most relevant that we should actually be talking about for this given customer. After that, similar thing that we've talked through before, we draft the first email, we score it, we write the final draft, and then we introduced a new thing because emails are great, but our SDR teams, they're still making calls. So like, how do we make sure that they're feeling informed and helpful on the calls that they're making? So we also will use Claude to help us generate prospect briefs and also call scripts that they can reference as they're making these actions. And then we load these into Outreach just like before. So the output of that looks similar to what we saw before. However, one of the things that you'll notice is it continues to be even more researched and even more relevant for who we're reaching out to. And we're actually able to call out very specific customers that we're supporting and what exactly it is that we're supporting them with. If there's URLs to what we're supporting them with, we can actually link that case study directly in here. So this is thousands of case studies that are all referenceable at any given time without those teams needing to go to those Tableau dashboards, copy the information back and forth and back and forth. And then lastly, one of the cool things as well is that we're actually able to pull in recent news. Scale-led venture with one of the Hello Patient in October 15. I ran this on October 16th. So it was highly relevant. And so what we see for our SDRs is that they're able to use this and pull in news from either that day or the day before that just continues to help our SDRs feel more and more confident in the messages that we're generating for them. And the great thing about this is we actually have seen positive results from this. So again, we've seen this for over 55,000 prospects, and we've maintained that 7.6% reply rate, which is over 15 times higher than where we were at before. So not only are we driving higher reply rates, but our SDR teams don't have to do this manual research anymore. And these emails are available to them in the platform that we're using. We're not introducing any new tools. We're just augmenting the tools to make them more efficient for them. And so the next question that we talked a little bit about is, what about call prep? Our SDR teams still are finding value in making calls. I would say it's still a huge driver in what gets meetings for our team. So how do we take all this data and present it for them again in a platform that works? And so what we do is we actually will create prospect briefs, which contain all details about who the person is, what their role is, a quick summary on them. It'll have a recent event trigger. So what we're seeing here is any news that's come up, what the date is on the news. It'll give you a hypothesis for the pitch for Snowflake and just help that rep feel more confident. Because these reps, again, they are just working through a task list and there's call. And a lot of times it's they might be calling company A and then they're calling company B. So for them to be able to context switch really quickly, it's important that they have these insights that they can review as quickly as possible. And the other thing we'll generate for them is call scripts. Now, we have SDRs that are senior, that have been around for a while. But with a team of 300, we are constantly hiring SDRs. So it's important that our SDRs feel confident in how they're going through their call scripts. So we will give them a script that they can actually use and reference. It has objections and ways to navigate those to ensure that they're having the most success on the call. So I'll leave you with this. These are the takeaways that we learned. First and foremost, spend time building specialized prompts. I see a lot of people building AI solutions, and they're just, as these AI models have more context window, that doesn't necessarily mean that you should be using all 200,000 tokens to do one job. These models are really good, and they're even better when you just have them do a single thing. And with orchestration, the beauty of this is that you can still do all of this in an automated way. If you just have step one, do this. Then after this is done, push it to that next prompt and the next prompt. It's a really powerful thing that you can take today and go implement. The second thing is to validate everything. So as I talked before, especially as you're doing things that are including third-party data, stuff that isn't fully vetted, make sure you build a validation layer. And it's in a couple of ways. Clean your data is important. Garbage in, garbage out, still a very real thing. So if your data is not clean, building in the validation layer to make sure that everything is up to your liking is going to build trust with your SDR teams, but also make sure that the emails and the content that you're sending out to whoever is going to be consuming it is valid and actually actionable. And the last one is, if you're not already building automated systems and you get stuck, try using XML to be able to parse out these details from these models. It'll help you build really advanced orchestrations to do actions on your behalf. So when people talk agents, Like this is a way that you can use some sort of orchestration platform to agentify workflows even further. And with that, I have some time left. And if people have questions on this, I would love to answer them. Yeah.
Thank you. So your SDRs in outreach, they identify who they're going to look out to or reach out to. They click go. How long does this take from start to finish before they have that call script in front of them?
Great question. It started out taking a long time. I would say with the models early, it was like 10 minutes to go through all of those things. The models have gotten faster. We use Sonnet 4.5. We're always upgrading our models to make sure they're most advanced. I'd say it takes around 2 to 3 minutes for it to go through that process. And so that can happen concurrently. So rep adds 20 prospects. That's 20 prospects going through in 2 to 3 minutes. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah. When you're doing the second step of the 3P, 1P account research for the first party research, are you also pulling in data from like past calls you might have had? Because I think one of the challenges we run into is someone had a call, that data is stored somewhere else, and then you're skipping details that were already covered.
We're working on trying to do that exact same thing and feeling the pain on that too, because it is true. Like we've got sales reps, your AEs who are just like picking up their cell phone, going to dial, and it's thanks a lot. That's not helpful for our teams. It's a challenge that we're facing. We're trying to drive this change management around, hey, if you make that call, log the notes somewhere so we know the context, but it's a pain point that we face. We're trying to introduce that more. So I think that from an acquisition perspective, that's where we started. We started from acquisition. Who are these customers that we don't already have that we can go after? Because that context, it's important, but it's not super vital. And as we've moved towards inbound or expansion opportunities, it has gotten harder because you would think, oh, we've got all this internal data, looking at expansion would be easier. But what we have found is that there's a lot of context about what's going on with our customers that we currently have that isn't always located in where it should be. So I don't have a solution for you today other than making sure that, your reps are logging that as much as possible in systems. Yeah. Start with that and then go over you.
Thank you. This was awesome. We're building something very similar right now, so perfect timing. Why did you choose the route of building your own deep research on top of Claude? Did you look at using any of the other deep research capabilities that are available via API from people other than Anthropic?
So we haven't. It mostly comes down to we wanted to build something that was entirely Snowflake, like as much as we could on Snowflake. So we use our AI models through Snowflake Cortex. So we have limited models and what we're able to use. We are working on advancements to be able to use some of those deep research models as well. But it also comes down to cost. Like some of those deep research models can cost like $250 plus to do research. So when we're doing web search on our own, significantly less than that. I would love to see comparisons of the deep research to see like how ours compares to that, but it's something on our roadmap to figure out and definitely worth considering and thinking about. Yeah. I'm going to get you 1 sec, Elliot, but one question over here first.
Yeah. So what is your most effective channel right now? So your emails really increased. You said calling is still effective. Curious, what's the most effective? And if there's another strategy or another channel you're thinking about as well, if that's like LinkedIn automation or different tools.
Yeah, I would say we started with emails because our reps were spending so much time writing them. And also they were just bad. They were really bad from the brand that we wanted to be sending from Snowflake. And we didn't want to get our emails blocked from reps just spamming people. So that's where we started. But I would say the calls are one of the biggest drivers of meetings for us, but also LinkedIn as well. So we've considered also within the steps in outreach is like, how do we generate a LinkedIn message that's more concise? Like an email is a little bit longer, but how do we make something that's more concise? So absolutely. We're always thinking about like, where are all the touch points that our reps are? What are all the touch points that they're doing? And how do we help them as much as possible? So LinkedIn is one of those steps as well, where we want to generate, like how we have the emails, we'll have a snippet that they can copy and paste directly into LinkedIn to get those messages out, because that is also a really powerful platform to use.
Hey, Jeff, I'm sorry if it was covered earlier, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on like how you guys think about memory or like continuous memory as you're surfacing context for reps, everything that's happened in the account or in the territory.
Yeah, I think that really comes down to, it's like we're not building a sophisticated machine learning model that's looking at emails that we've sent, the reply rates that come back, it's a little more complex than we think is worth going after. So we've kept it really simple and we've only focused on using prompts to generate these types of things. I think that one of the areas that I wouldn't say is necessarily memory, but I think is helpful is when we try and contextualize things like calls, there's a lot of data that exists in calls. So we do try and add, again, more prompts further in to help consolidate that information in a way that's more concise and more useful further downstream. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it. I don't think we really have a sophisticated memory model that takes all these things into consideration, but every week there's some new AI tool that's coming out that's making this easier and easier. And so I wouldn't imagine it'd be too long before these things start to come into play.
This is really interesting. We're same tip. I guess I'm curious to understand. It seems like I see the step 1 and the step 2, right? With the initial email and then the call with the script.
Yeah.
What happens if there's no response after that, right? Like, how long are these sequences? How many days? Like, at what point are you seeing people reply and actually show interest? And like, what is the AI doing to improve things to get those responses?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we still try and keep the structure of our sequence similar to what had previously been done by our content committee. So some of the sequences can be 18 steps that occur over 24 days or something like that. We see a reply. So we generate that first email. We also generate the 3 follow-up emails that get placed in there as well. But we're still adhering to that same outreach sequence. I will say that it does feel like reps are, even with all the information that we're providing them, they don't always make it through the sequences. So I do think there's going to be a rethink on how sequences are structured. I've seen some really powerful things and tools outside of outreach where you're actually able to trigger them being added to different sequences. And I think that's one of the flaws of outreach from being like openly transparent is, hey, if someone opens an email, let's put them in like some other sequence that uses Gen AI that able to say that they like actually did something, but outreach doesn't provide that. So we are a little bit cut off at the knees. But if you're using a platform or are able to do that, like all the more power, you should definitely take advantage of those insights to help drive different orchestrations.
Hey, thanks. So a question about this talk about how AI is going to replace SDRs. I'd love to hear, I don't know how long it's been since you've kicked off this workflow, but have you seen impact on SDRs' time, about how you've seen impact on the team overall, and maybe how you're planning the future of SDR teams?
Yeah, so we don't have any plans to get rid of the SDR teams or slow hiring. Like our SDR teams have so much to do. And I think one of the biggest goals with this is like, how do we automate these things they're doing so they have time to also do all these other things that they're falling behind on? Like our inbound follow-up was absolutely terrible because they're spending so much time doing emails. So one of the things that have gotten us here is now they're not going to spend so much time researching. Now we can make sure that some of these other core things that they need to do, they can go focus on that. I don't feel like there's going to be AI SDRs anytime super soon. I think at some point there will, but there's a lot that SDRs do outside of research and to collaborate with their AE. And as much as what I just showed you can be incredibly powerful for doing research, like we still have executives that are like super high up that are like your perfect ICP fit. We're like, yes, this is a great place to start, but they should still be out doing some more research, finding more things, doing things beyond the APIs that we have connected to figure out what's going on. So I think what this is doing, the way to think about it, is that it's just freeing up this really low value activity time so they can spend it on the higher value activity time. And maybe that's just dialing more, spending more time on the phone. Like I said, like emails are great, but it's a low value activity. Can provide meetings, awesome, takes a lot of time. But if we can have them spending more time calling people and connecting, then we want them doing that.
Hi. It seems like a lot of the data is very valuable for potentially customer success teams as they are continually supporting these teams and they have essentially the carryover what you've learned during the sales process into how do we keep them happy and also convert them next year.
Yeah.
Do you see that pull from customer success teams trying to use some of the data that you gathered here?
So to be transparent, I'm not super close with the customer success teams, so I can't answer that in 100% certainty, but my assumption and answer would be like, yes. I can't say that customer success team has been like, hey, Jeff, I want to use all these things yet. In an ideal world, yes, they should be.
Yeah.
But are they there yet? I don't think so. I know Christina was just talking about like the customer success teams are on that back burner of coming up, but they're coming up really quickly. So it wouldn't surprise me within the next couple of months to weeks if they were like, hey, like we need to figure out ways to do this. So you have a lot of information that you're pulling in. Where do we find a location that we can store all of this in a way that's presentable and actionable for our teams? Great question. Hi. Okay. Yes. Such a good question. Oh, that's such a good question. And it was a journey. So I think this is a really important question because it wasn't like 0 to 100 real quick. We started with a very small pilot team. And I think that's where we started to see like what wasn't working. That's where we were seeing like, hey, it's like your SEC investigation. And we're like, whoa, like we can't just scale this out to our entire team. So we started with a really small pilot team and we started with acquisition. So we started with like new business because we knew that expansion within our existing business was going to be really complicated. So we looked at who are SDRs that were doing the most that we were trying to drive business with. We started with a group of 10 of them. We created a Slack group. We said, hey, we created this sequence. We want you to start to add half your prospects into this AI sequence, half your prospects into your regular sequence. And so that's where we started to make modifications, find out where things weren't working, but really work closely with those teams to make sure that what product that we were building for them was what they wanted. So that's what I'd recommend. I wouldn't recommend going and just going all out, sending it to your team, being like, this is the future, go use it. Start small because there are going to be nuances for each of your companies as you're building this that you'll have to discover. And it'll be helpful to have a smaller audience and also have that audience feel empowered to share that knowledge with you, because as you scale to more SDRs, it's less likely you then become like this person that sent out a survey and you're like, hey, answer the survey. And you get 5% maybe back that actually answer that. But with those 10 people, you can really get the feedback that you need to know to build a product that works. Yeah.
I'm sorry, you mentioned phones is still an important channel for you. With this amount of like deep research, are you moving away from, if you ever tried it, like a parallel and power dialer situation and getting lower volume but better phone calls?
We've talked to a few providers on that, but we haven't actually adopted parallel dialers. I've heard positive things from some folks and I've heard not positive things from others. So I don't have an opinion on that.
Thanks.
I think it'd be really cool and powerful, but yeah, it's a great question. We're working on trying to build that through AI. It's complicated because there's obviously a lot of people out there. So we're trying to use Clay. It's very expensive. It's an awesome platform. So we're trying to find out the most cost-effective way. Hopefully sometime I'll get to present. I think we're working on some really cool stuff at Snowflake that's helping pull that in. But to answer your question, our reps are still spending a ton of time in Sales Navigator trying to find people, importing them in. It sucks. I feel for them. I watch that process. I'm like, oh my God. Every day you go in, you click these contacts and import them over. This sucks. So we're definitely trying to find more ways to get that in. So more to come on that for sure. All right, guys, it's lunchtime. Thank you for climbing up the stairs. Thank you for being here and have a good time.